There's a lot of politics around Keir Starmer at the moment, and we should get into this big immigration speech, which was yesterday, but there's still a lot of overhang. He unveiled drastic plans to cut migration, including changes to the length of time migrants have to spend here before applying for citizenship, increasing the language requirements for anyone wanting to live here, and also cracking down on working visas. So have a listen.
Today we publish a white paper on immigration, a strategy absolutely central to my plan for change that will finally take back control of our borders. Nations depend on rules, fair rules. Sometimes they're written down, often they're not. But either way, they give shape to our values. Now, in a diverse nation like ours, and I celebrate that, these rules become even more important. Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers.
Now, that phrase is the thing that's rung. His plans have faced criticism from all sides. This is what opposition parties had to say.
It was astonishing listening to Keir Starmer's proposals. I think Labour are taking the public for fools. Many of the things he was announcing are things that they are voting against right now.
The Labour Party haven't cared about immigration for decades and decades and decades, but they're in a blind panic because they realise this is now above the National Health Service as an issue of concern to British voters.
But also from businesses, charities and his own MPs who are concerned about the language Starmer used. So we see here the quote we heard, nations depend on rules, fair rules. Sometimes they're written down, often they're not. Either way, they give shape to our values. And then we come, so in a diverse nation like ours, and I celebrate that, he says, the rules become even more important because otherwise we could become an island of strangers. Now, just zone in on that and have a look at the next slide, because this is what people are saying. This goes directly back to Enoch Powell, who was a racist politician who said, but while to the immigrant entry to this country was admission to privileges, the impact upon the existing population was very different. And he's warning here that immigration would bring the country to its knees. He talked about rivers of blood in a separate speech. And here he says, the existing population were never consulted. They found themselves made strangers in their own country. Now, anything that goes back to Enoch Powell, who, by the way, was sacked. It was a famous photo. Edward Heath was Prime Minister, and he sacked Powell for racism. And I've got the photo of it here. And you can see this is it's a very famous photo where Heath was totally fed up with Powell. Powell then went his own way and over the years has become more and more controversial as a figure. And I don't understand, Michael, why Starmer would ever have gone anywhere near the phrases used by Enoch Powell.
Well, I think it's probably a row that he wanted. So it's interesting because if you take what he said at his word, it's not unreasonable. He's not saying that immigration makes us an island of strangers. He's saying that if you've got a diverse society, then you need to all follow the same rules and you might need to try a bit harder to sort of make sure those rules are collectively understood and that integration works. If not, we could become an island of strangers. So sort of taken on its own, I don't think it's particularly unreasonable. But it's probably not accidental that we're having this row now, because I think what Keir Starmer realised is he kept announcing that he was going to get a bit tougher on immigration and no one was noticing. And so what his advisors realised needed to happen was they needed to have a big public row where he was on the side of migration control, and that meant they had to say something that essentially triggered liberal-minded people. And so I think probably this is not an accident that this row has occurred now.
All right. Well, I suppose that's the analysis of it, but he's getting into dangerous territory with some of his MPs. But then others are worried about reform. They're worried about losing their seats. So let's talk about this. We're asking if the Prime Minister was wrong to warn that we may be becoming an island of strangers. Do you think it's cruel and divisive? Does it identify certain people as strangers in this country? I'll just show you some of the comments we've had online, which I just saved from Twitter. So Michael Rosen, famous author, my father was an immigrant. He became an English teacher and then somebody who trained students to become teachers. He lived the whole of his life on this island. Was he part of an island of strangers? Says Rosen. Tanita Tikaram, pop star. Starmer in happier days on the island of strangers. There are lots of pictures of Starmer here with immigrants These were in the days when they were a jolly photo op and not an excuse for every blank thing that happens to a nation more committed to extreme capitalism than the welfare of its people. There we are. People are going mad about it, Joanna.
Well, it's very divisive because suddenly you've got a Labour leader who's using the rhetoric of the far right. And it's come out of the blue and people really aren't sure how to take it. But when you compare Britain's immigration policy with America or Australia, we're pretty lenient. But my big concern is we are part of a Commonwealth here. We are a Commonwealth nation. We've worked with and we've taken over countries all the way around the globe, and we owe them a debt. And our doors to the Commonwealth should always be open. And I don't see how that should change.
Nigeria has 120 million people in it.
Well, not to every single one of them.
Right,
but I
that's
understand.
the point, isn't it?
That is the point. But we need the intelligence. We need the workers. You look at the care service, and they can't find British workers.
That's about our need. That the Commonwealth thing is about our responsibility to countries that maybe we used in the past. Now, whether we should be getting care workers from abroad, that's a good question. Do you think we should?
At the moment, look, my mother is in care, and they are, quite frankly, the most amazing people, care workers.
Are they Brits?
But, I would say in her care home, they're probably about 90% Brits, but it's down in Cheltenham, so it's a very different demographic there. But the reality is it's a really tough job. Yeah. It is a really tough job to do. And are we really saying that the 9 million economically inactive people in this country are suddenly going to stick their hands up and say, oh, I'm going to be a care worker? Well, they're not.
Yeah, well, I don't know, maybe, but they need to, don't they? Because we can't pay them to do nothing while importing people to do their jobs. I mean, I don't see how this is going to work. There's a clip circulating online which is critical of Starmer, and it compares his comments yesterday with a speech he made back in 2020. Have a look.
This plan means migration will fall. That's a promise. But I want to be very clear on this. If we do need to take further steps, if we do need to do more to release pressure on housing and our public services, then mark my words, we will. We welcome migrants. We don't scapegoat them. Low wages, poor housing, poor public services are not the fault of migrants and people who've come here. They're political failure. Political failure.
Very embarrassing. I mean, Keir Starmer is a fairly dishonest politician. I mean, if you look at... He made 10 pledges when he was elected leader of the Labour Party and then went on to break all of them. And if you look at what he said...
10 of them?
I think all 10 of them. I don't know. I don't remember them off by heart, but there were lots. Well, he said he'd renationalise all the utilities, and he said now he won't. He said he'd defend free movement, and now he's saying we're going to clamp down on migration. So he's I suppose you could say he's a bit of a snake. I mean, he would argue, when it comes to migration, he would argue that the situation has changed since 2020, because obviously 2020 net migration was 250,000. Now it's 750,000. So he could say the reason his position on migration has changed is because the reality underlying it has changed. But still, I do think it looks cynical, to say the least.
Is he right to use the phrase island of strangers? Gary in Dumfries and Galloway, is he right to use that phrase?
Hi, Jeremy. Well, I found that speech yesterday probably the most cynical, disgusting speech from a politician I've heard probably in my lifetime, and I'm 57 years of age. It was embarrassing.
Well, it's one of those ones where what you think he's turned into saying something just because he knows people want to hear it, or he's saying it without any intention of delivering it?
I think he wants to try and... he's terrified of the Reform Party, that's clear. He's terrified of the Reform Party. Yeah. And I feel that you can't out-reform. And I just feel that the whole thing was a cynical speech. It's like smoke and mirrors yet again from Keir Starmer. For a Labour politician to make that speech yesterday is sending shivers down my spine, to be honest. It was disgusting.
Thank you. It's hard, isn't it? Because you take Trump versus Kamala Harris, right? They have one debate. What's the one thing we remember from the debate? Is him saying, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. He says migrants are eating people's pets. What does Kamala do? She doesn't go, you're right, and we've got to stop it. She laughs and says, you're crazy. Who wins the election? And, laughing and saying you're crazy at Nigel Farage isn't going to work anymore. Maria in Hampshire, hi.
Hi.
What do you think?
Well, basically, we're allowing people to come over and come over and come over, and they don't seem to do any of the jobs for a long amount of time, and nobody's checking up on them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's give you a pass on that, and then ask the question, is this the moment Starmer realised that he needs to do something, or is he just saying something?
Starmer's just saying something.
Right. Do you think Reform are going to sort it?
Reform will sort it.
Okay. Do you think Reform are going to win the next election?
Yes. I'll be honest with you. I was a Conservative person.
Yeah.
I'm now a reformer.
Well, you must have some Tory friends in Wiltshire. Are they Conservative still, or have they Reform?
I'm seeing a mass migration to Reform, and it concerns me. But the reality is the Tory party is not really a united party at all. And the last government was pretty much a shambles. And what we're looking at, career politicians are not delivering to the nation what we deserve. We need people that have come out of industry, who've come out of business, who've come out of working, doctors, nurses, people who've got that experience to guide policy change, mathematicians, economists, and we're not. We're just not having that quality.
Experts.
Well,
you want a government by...
You said it, experts. We
Really?
want experts there. We need to get quality of individuals that are not doing it for ego or public, as they're doing it because they actually want to give back. It used to be a philanthropic exercise, doesn't it, going into politics, and now it's a career. And I just think there's a lack of knowledge.
Isn't politics going the other way? It's going towards visceral instinct, Trump, Farage. Not, it's a sense of we know what you want and we can do it. That's where we're going. It's nothing to do with experts. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I think the problem with Starmer is I think I think his team want to sort of trigger the libs. I think what they should be doing is pointing out that actually the reason communities have weakened isn't really because of migration. It's because it's very difficult to stay in the same place. I've lived in 15 different houses in my life, and it's very difficult to put down roots if you're constantly moving because your landlord's constantly putting up the rent. My sister had to move to Bristol instead of raising her kids in London because she couldn't afford to live here, which meant that my parents lived very far from their grandkids. So there are all sorts of arguments we can make about why community might not feel as strong as we would like it to, and it does seem a bit cheap to make this about migration.
Cal is in London. Hi, Cal. Is Starmer wrong to use the phrase island of strangers?
Yes. I mean, it's basically... morning, everybody. And I'd like to say... thank you to Michael Walker for his coverage of the Gaza genocide on Novara Media. It's been a insight, as in how real news has been providing the actual real stories that have been going on. So thank you for that. Keep up the good work.
Okay. Yeah.
And but on to the point in hand, I think basically it's basically two-faced Starmer, isn't it? In reality, I mean, this subject is primarily about integration, and as I said to your telephone reception people this morning, it's all about integration in the fact that Asian people or anybody who's non-white always has to integrate. But if you flip the question around and ask most of your panelists, probably except for Michael, how many Asian or non-white people are in your inner circle, the answer would probably be very few or none. So,
I don't know about that. That sounds like a question from the 20th century, mate. I'm looking at Joanna thinking, I don't even want to say, let's all count our Asian friends, but come on, Cal.
I think it's a true point in the fact that why is it the other way around? Why do Asian people always have to integrate with the white people? We've been doing this since we've been in the country.
Fair. That's a very fair question. So should it be the other way around? Should then it's what is to do with then white resident Brits working out how to be more multicultural?
Yes, I mean, it boils down to that, because if you're a minority in any culture whatsoever, then you have to integrate. Because I'm born in the 1970s. When I went to school, I was one of 3 Asian people in the school.
Yeah.
And 98% or 97% of the population in that school was white.
Yep.
So we didn't see ourselves any different from anybody else. So we had to pretty much get on with life. So in reality, if you flip it the other way around, what's changed? You've got
Cal, I've got to move on, but thank you so much. Very interesting. After the break, we're taking more calls on this. Just want to make sure we get your calls on. Was the Prime Minister right to warn immigration could lead to Britain becoming, his phrase, an island of strangers? 0207 862 2222. Thank you, Cal. See you shortly. Now, more calls on the island of strangers. Is this a bad one to talk about this? I don't know. Your thoughts. Henrietta's in London. Hi, Henrietta.
Good morning, Jeremy.
What do you think about this? You used the wrong phrase here.
I very much believe so. I do believe it's a rather reckless statement to make. I believe it's one that's likely to fuel racism more in this country. And I don't believe it's a correct statement to make at all.
Well, look, if he does, I guess in the end he's elected by people who want him to do stuff they want him to do, and maybe what they want him to do is to tackle immigration, and he hasn't got a handle on it, and that's where he's coming from.
But it's clear he doesn't really have an idea, does he? Because realistically, majority of the British people, working class British people, don't want to work. If they wanted to work, there would not be work for the immigrants, for the foreigners.
Well,
right?
Here we go to Joanna, because I'm afraid we come back to this again and again and again, that for some reason British people can't hear alarm clocks. We don't know why. We don't know why.
Do you know, at the moment, 1 in 4 state school children is perpetually truant from school. This is not truant, perpetually absent from school. Yeah. This isn't truancy. This is because their parents are allowing them not to go to school. I know one school governor down near me where the teachers do a school run every morning to get the kids into school. So I hear what you say, Henrietta. There seems to be this lack of gumption to get into the workplace and to really get stuck in to earning a living and being the next generation of the workforce. 40%
of 18-year-olds think they will never be able to have a job. Not because they won't get one, because they won't be able mentally to have one, or it will be inconvenient.
Or because artificial intelligence will have replaced their profession, potentially.
No, they don't think they will be, a job will not suit them. But Henrietta, we can't change this, can we? That's where we are. That's why we've got this £2 trillion pound debt.
I understand.
I don't know what the answer is.
You need foreigners to keep this country going. Seriously.
Thanks, Henrietta.
You need them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stephen in West Yorkshire, hi.
Oh, it's a joke, Jeremy.
What is?
If I wanted to go to Australia, New Zealand, or Canada, I'd have to show them that I'm fit to go there. I'd have to have a profession. I'd have to pass a point system. So why are we getting called racist? Are Australia racist? Are Canada racist? Are New Zealand racist? It's crazy.
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, the Australians had the situation that we had with boats. They had people turning up, not just on dinghies, on massive ships and nowhere else to go. And in the end, they took the brutal step of putting them all on a small island. I can't remember the name. It wasn't Papua New Guinea, was it?
I think it was Nauru.
Nauru, that's right. It was.
They did ultimately have to shut it down because it was so ridden with abuse.
It was almost like not a concentration camp, but it was that sort of idea.
A prison camp where you had lots of people suffering degrading treatment. So it did immediately, well, it worked. It stopped the boat.
We would never do that in this country, and I'm not suggesting we should, but why would we never do that?
Well, for one, there isn't an island.
Well, we tried Rwanda.
Well, I suppose the issue with Australia was also that there were people who were in international water for a very long time. So they could pick them up in international water and take them to Nauru, whereas in Britain, the moment you go from French water, there isn't really international water between France and Britain. Because it's a smaller channel.
But the latest I saw was that Trump may use the Rwanda hotels for his migrants. Stephen, thank you. Not happy. Bev in Buckinghamshire. What do you think about Starmer using this phrase, island of strangers?
Oh, hello, Jeremy. I don't think it's the right language to use, to be honest. And I personally think, well, it's not just me. I think Joe Public thinks he's got it so wrong. I mean, they're so valued in places, immigrants are so valued in places like care homes, taxi drivers, all sorts of different professions. Does he not understand that generally it's the boats that are getting to people, the money that's spent on the hotels, and I did hear that they might get driving lessons. You know, I genuinely feel sorry for anyone that's come away from a war-torn country. But I do ask myself, where are the women? These men, mostly men, apparently, over 80%, where are the women? Have they left them in these places?
Well, you raised a very good point, because what Starmer's talking about this week is legal migration, which the government can control. And the boats is the disorderly, I suppose, or sometimes illegal. And I don't know if he's got an answer on that, Bev. I don't know if he's got anything. He just talked about smashing the gangs.
Yeah, I think that's the answer he needs, Jeremy. Not the people that are genuinely working here, doing a good job and earning a living. Not the boat people are the problem.
Okay, thank you, Bev.
I don't know the answer, but, you know, anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day. I've heard care homes in the last 24 hours saying, this is going to blitz us.
Yeah.
Because we can't, as discussed, we can't get local Brits to do the jobs. We need to recruit from abroad, and now they can't.
The care home that Mum was in before, the one she's in now, I would say that was probably about 60% international agency workers.
Okay.
And they are absolutely key to what is getting bigger and bigger.
Brian is in Greater London. Hi, Brian.
Good morning, Jeremy. Morning, panel.
Morning. What do you think, Brian?
Well, Jeremy, when I pick my grandchildren up from primary school and we go through the local park, nobody at all speaks English. And when I get on the bus to go to my local shopping centre, nobody speaks English. So I think that makes us an island of strangers already, doesn't it?
Well, you're in London, aren't you? Which is particularly
Greater London, yeah.
Greater. I mean, it's particularly global, isn't it? Diverse, yeah. There are some people, Brian. I've heard people say, "Isn't London great? There's 200 languages spoken there."
It might be great for some people. It's not great for the local people.
Thank you, Brian. Have a good day. Thanks for all your calls. Matt Allwright will carry on this conversation on his show later.